Adrian Fahrenheit Tepish here, and this is a series of episodes from the podcast of Whatever Happened to the Game. Links to the podcast will be in the description. The following is a series of episodes from this podcast known as Whatever Happened to the Game, in which the Castlevania franchise is discussed. Over the course of this 3 episodes, in case you missed while it was streaming live, you have a chance to once again view all 3 episodes as part of this premiere. Thank you for your time and enjoy the show. All right, so we are on. So today's little presentation I have gotten set up, and we're going to have our little introduction soon after I get the first slide done. Whatever happened to Castlevania? So Albaleo and I are basically guys who like monster films and media, and we're going to introduce ourselves in the next slide and how we got introduced to the Castlevania franchise. So... all right. So who are you and how did you become interested, Albaleo?
Well, hello, I am Albaleo, and I think the first game I played in Castlevania was Simon's Quest, back when my brother and I had the classic NES.
Wow. That's farther back than I started. I remember my first console I actually owned at home was somewhat of an inherited Nintendo 64.
Oh.
So I mean, I borrowed the Super NES because apparently those cartridge systems can still be good for years if you take care of them. So so this is like 2000, and I borrowed my friend's Super NES, and some of the games he had let me borrow with the console were Super Castlevania 4, which I later learned that's a remake of the original.
Mm-hmm.
Only it's more stages and longer. So that was how I got started. I later tried when I got the PlayStation console the PS2 to back play the older PS1 games because the PS2 had backwards compatibility. That's how I got the Symphony of the Night disc working, because PS2 plays PS1. That was the good gimmick that those old consoles had in the start of the 21st century. Play your old games. So yeah, that's how I got started. It wasn't even the first one. I later went back because I have this preoccupation with trying to find the predecessors, and that's where I got started. So later I got the other ones for NES. I actually played them online because Facebook had let you play. I don't know if they still do. They let you play the old NES games back when Facebook was a new thing.
There are plenty of ways to still get a hold of all kinds of games in browsers, and I never really got much into that. So I did Castlevania 2 because Simon's Quest and will always have a special place in my heart, especially since it came up with bloody tears.
Right.
After that, I hadn't really touched Castlevania. Shy of like Symphony and 64.
Yeah.
And then I just much of it was trying to fill in the gaps as well, because same thing with like Final Fantasy and whatnot. It's like I had 3, which is actually 6, obviously.
Yeah, that was the big mistranslation. They sold it in English as 3, but it was actually number 6. They didn't release 3 until way later. The actual 3 in Japan until way later. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be another one of our topics later. We're thinking of talking about whatever happened to Final Fantasy is the next topic after Castlevania, of course, because this one's going to take 2 or 3 parts. There's no way I can see of doing it that way. But I'm going to put all 3 parts of Castlevania into one video with chapters so people can see the whole thing all in one after it's done. But yeah, I'm so I mean that's how I got started. Is I played it in the browser. But the next one we're going to talk about is some of the surprises we had at how certain features got started in Castlevania because a lot of them are older than we think. So this is the Saga Begins with the NES is the most commonly known one. Not as many people know about the MSX PC or the Famicom.
Yeah, up until your video discussing the number of ports of the first one, I was like, wow. I
Yeah, I
didn't know
mean,
Vampire Killer was a
I'm
thing.
I'm gonna actually try to name all the Simon Belmont ones, and I'll see how well I can do. So there's Castlevania. There
Mm,
is Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest that also stars him. Super
yeah.
Castlevania 4 also stars him. Castlevania Chronicles stars him.
hmm
Uh, trying to think if I can remember the other remake. Okay, he's not the star of Super Smash Brothers Ultimate in another fighting game, but he's in. So he's in
Judgment.
a total of. Yes, he's in Judgment too. So that makes 7. Thank you, Alvi. So there's 7 that star him, and it's closer to 10 if we actually get to Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. Just and another fighting game that I forget the name of it that we don't know as much about because it wasn't on one of the bigger consoles. But he's the most common character in the whole franchise, which is fine because it's like how he started it. So
Yeah, shy of Dracula, Simon is, I think, fairly stated to be the herpes of Castlevania.
I sort of think of him as the way how Mario started Mario. I mean, they added in his
hmm
brother Luigi for Super Mario Brothers plural, but there was arcade before that because they just needed a way of excusing a player too, so they made Luigi. But Luigi has become his own character, thankfully, ever since the franchise started.
hmm
Now, the crazy thing is, what I found out, and I found out after finally figuring out a way to get these games running, like Vampire Killer or Simon's Quest, finally, is that the features, the pseudo RPG features, aren't that new. They go way back in Castlevania.
It's astonishing how, like, I and I understand fairly why Simon's Quest gets shit on because it has a lot of problems. Like a lot
Oh,
of
it
the
is.
a lot of the level design and the enemy placement is just terrible. But
It
it's
is.
funny how much Simon's Quest and, to a lesser extent, Dracula's Curse, but how much Simon's Quest is in the DNA of Symphony of the Night.
Oh, yeah. Simon's Quest was the first time they had buying items from shops. I mean, it's easy to because you don't really have that in the other games in between that and Symphony, but Simon's Quest was where it all got started. Now the second part is Vampire Killer was MSX PC, and not many of us were familiar with MSX PC and tons of other consoles like 3DO or
hmm
the various brands. X68000 by Sega. There's plenty of those. They didn't sell as well as or as were as well known as the Nintendo and Sega consoles were, but Vampire Killer was when they started having the whole backtrack and find a key to unlock a door that you got in Symphony. And Vampire Killer was, it was on an MXX PC back in 1986, the same year as the first Castlevania was.
Hmm.
Yeah, the whole thing wasn't that new.
Yeah.
And now we're still in the NAS era. We're getting to Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. And I think what was special about that one, right?
If you're talking about the characters and the diverging pathways, yes.
Yes, exactly.
It
You could swap characters, and that happens a lot in Harmony of Despair. I'm not fond of Harmony of Despair. It doesn't really have much of a plot to it. I mean, it can be a fun co-op multiplayer experience, but
mhm.
but the character swap thing was the interesting part about number 3. There's multiple ways to beat the game, or you can even just stage as Trevor being solo the whole time if you want.
Yeah. The original Dark Souls run, just muscle your way through all of Dracula's Curse with just Trevor.
Yeah, the OG Dark Souls right there.
Basically, especially that doppelganger fight.
Oh yeah,
It's so rough with Trevor. That's why it's part of the reason I always like Grant, and why I will always hate Netflix for what they did to Grant, because he's
oh I
obviously,
know.
like, he was obviously supposed to be the priest that had a knife, and then I was like, oh cool, he slashed his eye, he's a pirate, he, and then he killed him. I'm like, oh no,
Right.
no.
Yeah,
And then
I
he
know.
never showed up for the rest of it, and I'm like, oh god, why?
And the thing is that, and it's a lot of these modern films, like TV, that they write, they just can't hold an attention because there's so much potential with Grant to have some kind of level of distrust. Sypha too, is that there's so much potential for distrust and to try and build that cohesion over time with their team members because, okay, in the case of Grant, Alucard's dad killed his dad, right? So like your father killed my father. How do I know you're not allied with your father? That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
with Sypha, it's like I guess they changed what Trevor Belmont was, and and I'm going to get into the whole Lords of Shadow because a lot of the Netflix series seems to be trying to borrow from Lords of Shadow because in Lords of Shadow, like Trevor Belmont is Alucard. It's really weird, but the it's weird. We'll talk about Lords of Shadow way later, but the whole
I
being
know.
rejected thing has to do with the fact that that Trevor's father became a vampire or became Dracula. So the whole "my father is Dracula" kind of works for making the Belmonts not be in good terms with the Holy guys.
Mm. Yeah, I not I don't obviously want to go crazy with like going down on
No, we need to
the
go. We're going
Netflix
to have to
series, but
cover
man,
Super NES and Game Boy too today, so
yeah,
I won't
because
drag on too long.
yeah, I had already like plotted out in my head an entire, like, how they should have done just off of Dracula's Curse, the like a 10 or 12 episode series for just Dracula's Curse, and it's just like, how did you screw this up? But then again, they're not really fans over
Well,
at
like, and not just that; it's just the writing thing. People don't want to hold on to tension. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I remember my wife and I were watching it back when we were newlyweds. We were watching Bones, and there was this total simp serial killer, computer hacker villain in the show Bones called Christopher Pillant. The thing that made him such an interesting villain is that he escaped numerous times when they tried to get him, and they didn't. They were willing to keep the tension there that Pillant could do some kind of dick move to you when you're trying to get him. He was out there as an existential threat. And now in modern writing, they just do this whole thing like Alucard says, "Well, they tried to kill me," and the gender swap Grant they send there says, "Oh, that's no big deal." Like, really? You really want to just kill tension? Like the character already knows it, or the character is resolved with that problem right there. Like, why? I mean, I was raised on these 80s and 70s films like Jaws, and the first Jaws is great because you see bit by bit that this shark is smarter than you think a shark would be. Not to mention he's wearing away at your methods of trying to get him. So, I mean, I recommend the first Jaws, and I pretend like, well, aside from Michael Caine, I try to pretend that Jaws 4 doesn't exist.
Pretty much, even he does, because he
Even
said
he
in an interview.
trolled. It
Yeah,
was fun. That interview was amazing because he's like, maybe.
like
He's like, maybe. Maybe it
he
existed.
famously said that he hasn't seen the movie. He hasn't seen the movie, but he saw the house that the movie paid for. That's the whole reason he did it, and he didn't get to go and get his Academy Award or whatever at the time because he went to go and work on Jaws 4. He does not like it. Yeah, it's brutal. Also, hello Shadow, how are you doing?
So, yeah, that whole thing is where I'm going to kind of end our part with the NES era, and before we go into Super NES, it's just that it's the writing issue is that people don't want to keep tension, And as someone who's grew up on these older films like the original Jaws or Star Wars, it's just like tension helps. It helps you have a story that you can justify continuing because it's not resolved. Anyways,
Yeah,
so
don't get me
that's
started on tension
the
because man,
NES era.
Fallout.
Yeah, that's the same tension problem in that show in that series.
Yeah. Anyway, so the 90s.
Yes, and now we're in the Silver Age or the SNES. So yeah, that's when they started really, really remaking with Super Castlevania 4, which is, as I mentioned, how I got started with it, how I
Mhm.
introduced. Yeah,
Yeah, Castlevania 4 and everything within the SNES era was certainly a great refinement of classic of the original series and its formula.
I mean, it was a time where they could say like, "Hey, we can make games that are more than 1 megabyte now."
Yeah, back when they were still trying to figure out how to save space, like the
Oh
way they
no,
did the
like
Zelda.
no, like they're doing all kinds of things to try and conserve space, like making the original Mario Kart. I mean, the developers at Nintendo literally went to watch NASCAR races and tried to like create a simple grid for the development of the game because they had so much data storage limitations at that time.
Hmm. Yeah,
Obviously,
the developers of the original Zelda, they actually designed all of the maps to fit together as perfect puzzle pieces because they thought that would save them space on the cartridge. That's how
oh
like
yeah, and there
that's
was limited
crazy how
color.
little people knew at the time.
That was limited colors too, because like in programming, like one of the key parts is the number of potential colors you're using in your scheme affects the data you're using up. So they limited the number of colors, obviously in the NES, but then they used more in SNES because they could finally have more data to their game.
Hmm. So which of these three do you like? I'm obviously I have a bias towards Rondo. Rondo's I think the best one.
I mean, I prefer Rondo as well. I mean, at first I played the Dracula X for SNES, and then I really realized that Rondo was a little more should I say, complex, and it had a little more of the the save game mechanics. I just didn't have the Turbo GFX at the time, so I had to wait until I could unlock it in Dracula X Chronicles. But you can, I'll eventually do videos on showing how to unlock the game within a game, which
Hmm.
is both Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night in Dracula X Chronicles, and that's what makes it an actual good remake of Rondo of Blood because you can unlock the older games in it.
Hmm. Yeah, my first Rondo was on the Wii because they put up the TurboGrafx for sale, or the like a bunch of the games through the Wii shop channel. So
Yeah, that was a
that
good
was when I
thing.
first ran into it, and I was just like, oh, that makes sense. I was wondering why this game sucked otherwise, because then you get
Yeah,
the original Japanese one, and you're like, oh, they just like rebuilt the game from the ground up.
right. And as I'm going to mention, this is part of these games we've covered so far in the Castlevania Remastered collection, which is for everything, even
Hmm.
for PC right now. So I'll later put a link in the description when we're done, just to let people know. Yeah, if you don't know, you can get these older Castlevania games as a remake and play them on your PC. It's that great. It's that convenient today, even for old games. Right now, we're in a good time. So the
Yeah.
next one we're going to get into is going to be the Game Boy because we're not going to forget the Game Boy games that came out in the starting era. We're not going to forget them. So yes, the era of the Game Boy.
Yeah,
I didn't.
this was definitely rough.
I missed all of these. I didn't actually get them until I bought on Amazon. I bought the 301 classic Game Boy games and slipped it into a Game Boy Advance, which I regret. The one thing I regret so much today is that I didn't show my video of putting the Game Boy Advance. It's actually an SP Silver back together. So now I have essentially a Game Boy for less than the cost of what I would have to buy a full Game Boy on Amazon just by getting the parts and putting it together. It could have been a good video if I show myself putting it back together, but it is what it is.
It's funny. So I have played each of these a little bit. I whichever one I I actually have the because I have a ton of the physical cartridges all up here.
Yeah.
I've got a big collection on a like 8-foot shelf above me of NES through Wii and whatnot. I have Adventure. I have the first one because I was working as security at a Smash Bros tournament,
Oh yeah.
and I was walking around, and this it was called Smash and Splash. It was an old my old boss used to run it because he was I'll keep it short. He created a major for the Smash Brothers circuit and it became a national. It became huge, right? Because it was a
Right.
Smash Brothers tournament at a water park venue. So this was up in
Okay.
Wisconsin,
Oh, cool.
and I was walking around as security, and that's actually where I got my flat cap Doom hat, which is really nice.
Yeah,
And I
good.
was walking around as security, and I happened to look over, and I'm like, "Oh, they've got a lot of classic cartridges." And I see somebody flipping through a bunch of them, and I saw Castlevania, and I was like, "There's no way." So yeah, they were just like, "Yeah, $5." I was like, "Yoink!" So that's how I got my physical copy of Castlevania Adventure.
Yeah. Works for works, I guess.
Mhm.
But I think the fun part is like the 301 Game Boy cartridge. I'm giving it one of my kids play it too. My boys play it too.
Uh-huh.
So I give him a Game Boy because I just can't stand the idea of giving him those tablets.
Oh
Play
God,
it,
no,
play it,
no,
play it,
no.
play a portable console like what your father used to play. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, exactly. My lady and I, we want to like raise the kids with at some point in the far future when we have them, we want to raise kids on like the classics to get them to appreciate where things came from and
That's what we're doing
then
right now.
introduce. Yeah.
I mean, we're not doing so much the tablets right now, but we're letting them play. The Nintendo Wii, and I've got the Game Boy Color thing, and I'm playing a Nintendo DS, which I just had to replace a bad part in it, and it runs just fine. So we've got consoles, and that's our main idea. Is we'd rather let them play consoles and not get lost on tablets and the whole online world. That's just our choice. That's our
Yeah, it is the
choice.
first one. It is the first one I've got. That's what I thought. Yeah. But yeah, no, I absolutely. I don't I'm not a big fan of tablets myself, and after having seen my brother having to repair multiple through his years growing, raising his kids,
Oh yeah,
I'm just like, no, I'm good.
yeah. No, it's fine. So yeah, we'll go to the Game Boy one. So there's Castlevania Adventure, Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge.
Mm,
That's a rare one because it's a case of a Belmont from Adventure. Christopher has to go back and help his own kid. That's really rare. I I don't recall much happening much. I mean, I guess Portrait of Ruin is the reverse with Jonathan, but we'll talk about that next episode, because that's Ega era. But yeah, it's a rare case of where the parent gets to be involved with their child in the same game, and when the protagonist is older too. I mean,
hmm
Soleil is obviously, I believe it's like 17, 18 in that one. So I mean, Christopher is most likely in his late 30s or 40s, depending on how old he was when Soleil was born.
hmm Yeah, because
So
it's a mix. I think it's because it conflicts with Just's game is why they ended up getting rid of those first two of the Game Boy because uh
oh,
where was it? Because Just is before Richter.
you're
Richter
right.
is
Juice is if Juice were still alive in Rondo of Blood, he would be like 62 years old.
yeah.
So Christopher was, I think Christopher might have actually been before Simon though.
It should be Trevor, Simon, Christopher,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Just, and then Richter.
Oh, yeah. Let me see. I'm actually gonna
I'm
take a look.
so confident that's the case, because the other reason why the trilogy as a large got removed is because of Sonya, because that
Right,
conflicted with
but
things. And
the big thing with Sony though is it goes against first against the idea of lament of innocence. The second one is the fact that at the end of the game it says that Sonya's kid is also Dracula's kid, meaning that Alucard is the father of her child.
yes, which goes against your character, because
Well,
you
I
know,
mean it depends. I don't have a firm stance either way. I mean we could talk more about it in the Iga era because that's where
sure, sure.
the ideas come in. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't have a solid stance. Let's see. Uh, late
I
1600s.
think Nocturne of Reflection is like the nail on the
It's
coffin, as it were.
it's 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 really it's it's essentially romantic comedy type drama,
Yeah,
which it's not my cup of tea, so to speak.
sure, sure.
I mean, I'm not interested in seeing these characters like Alucard. Like, I don't know how to reciprocate my emotions very well. I'm stuck with, oh no, I'm going to kill this guy because he made a threat about Maria, and so on and so on.
You could tell the people on the show were definitely not fans of Castlevania like we are, because if they had known anything about Nocturne of Reflection, they definitely would have done that to Adrian, because I was just like, no, I've seen this before. Breathe, breathe.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I mean, it didn't really need to happen. I mean, I
No,
feel that
never did.
I feel that there's various details in the games that can be taken one way or another, and those are enough. I mean, the whole picture of it, like Alucard sitting there mourning, it being the official picture for Eric Licard, and we're going to talk more about the Iga era of Fortune of Ruin, but that
Uh,
says enough. I mean, it's someone who, for whatever reason, we don't know why Alucard became absent, but it's someone who took up his spot, and he's dead. So Alucard's going to be sad about that no matter what.
yeah, they should have just stuck with the Vampire Hunter D characterization, where he's just
I mean,
scared of what he can do to
to an
others.
extent, it works, but to an extent it doesn't, because in Vampire Hunter D you don't have this intermittency when monsters are relatively gone, and that's what we're going to talk about more with the Iga era, is because the Iga era it's very anti-war.
Yes.
It's very incredibly it it doesn't it has a lot of things that a lot of audiences I feel don't understand about anime. And another place that's really anti-war is Studio Ghibli. Those are another case of their films where the point is both sides are essentially not that great off because they're
Mhm.
fighting with each other. It's unnecessary. So I think that's a good part. But yeah, the other thing that Castlevania Legends had was they tried to squeeze it in as the last Game Boy game before Game Boy Color came in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on the really tail end of one of the last old Game Boy games that they had coming in. So and that's
Yeah.
part of the problems. It won't be the last one either.
Yeah. It's funny too, because like I have the Super Game Boy,
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm not worried about it not being in color.
How was the Super Game Boy system? I never quite got to that one.
Oh,
It was
the
you
Super Game
basically
Boy.
plug it into your TV, right?
So the Super Game Boy is it's an adaptation cartridge. So you put the Game Boy cartridge into the Super Game Boy, and then the Super Game Boy goes into your Super Nintendo.
Ah,
And
okay.
so you hit L and R, and it pops up a menu that allows you to change the entire color scheme, into from the original
Right,
through like 12 different presets. You could change the background, because obviously, like, so they didn't have a proper scaler for like
right,
dropping. So like the quality is great, right? Especially back then on the CRTs.
right,
But the Game Boy games won't quite fill it out. So they actually have borders around it that you can do. There's a bunch of presets, like there's a sign in the woods, or a movie theater. There's a bunch of those. And then there's just
right.
a flat blank one that you can just draw around in like it's Mario Paint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of. If you ever get a chance, just look up the videos of that, and it's just like, oh wow, that's you got to play like all the Game Boy games on the big screen. Obviously, because it's a cartridge, you couldn't like trade Pokemon or anything if you wanted to, but you could still play
Right.
the game, have the Pokemon for later, and then just pop it into the Game Boy. Back
Yeah.
when Nintendo actually cared.
Yeah, they actually
you
cared.
know.
Yeah, before the dark times, before the Empire.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's coming it, and now we have a lot. So we can open it and talk more about answering questions at this point, if you in the audience have some. But this is the last 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, sure. Uh, will Bloodlines be held at a later time?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm putting in. I realized with Bloodlines being more connected to Portrait of Ruin as a direct sequel, I feel it fits in better. So that's why I edited it into part two as a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, Bloodlines is based on a lot of assumptions that got retconned with the Iga era and Symphony of the Night. The entire assumption in Bloodlines, or even before Symphony of the Night, was that Alucard was dead. They did that in the Choose Your Own Adventure book called Legend of Satanic Castle, where they assumed Alucard was dead, and he had uh, his daughter or granddaughter, whatever it is, named Layla, taking his spot. And Eric Licard takes his spot. I don't know why, because he's absent. We'll never know. We'll most likely never know why Alucard's absent for so long. Is he dead again? I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, whatever the reason for it is, Eric is his designated replacement, just like Jonathan or John. I keep getting John and Jonathan mixed up. Forgive me. The
Oh,
way
you're good.
John Morris is the fill-in for the Belmont.
Mm-hmm.
So his designated inheritance is the Licard family, which is funny because Licard is also Dracula in reverse. It's in Romanian. It goes if you spell it in reverse, it's Edrac L, which is Romanian for he is the devil. So it's another reverse
Oh,
Dracula name
huh.
with a card.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised I didn't think of it being that way, but Licard does sound similar to first. Oh, so yeah, it's another Dracula in reverse because it's a way of saying that they're filling in for Alucard.
And
But
and
yeah,
the Belmonts at the same time. That's pretty clever.
yeah. Well, they did Morris because it's the Dracula novel is supposed to be semi-canon to Castlevania, and as what happened in 1897.
Mm-hmm.
Because 1897 is 100 years after Symphony. So yeah. So,
Yeah. Interesting. Well, which of the classic three is your favorite?
oh, my favorite. I'm gonna say it's actually the first. It's actually the first one. I mean, I do like the whole character swap and multiple paths, but I really enjoy going to the first one, and even while Castlevania 4 is interesting, how you have the multi-directional whip, it kind of takes out the reason for having the sub weapons almost, because the whole reason the
Uh-huh.
original one to use sub weapons is because your whip only goes one direction. So if you want to hit someone above you, you throw an axe or holy water, or if you want to have a barrier in front of you while you're intermittent with your whips, you throw the holy water and the flames, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I still enjoy Super Castlevania 4. It's just something that had the added mechanics like the swinging on the whip or hitting the switches with the whip and so on. Because that was
I
something
really
that
wish they had. Yeah.
added to what you got in the original game at the same time.
I wish they had designed more around the whip because the whip is like 25% of the screen or something like that. The calculations are crazy. It's like 256 pixels is It's like 256 by 244 is the pixel
Right.
resolution for the Super Nintendo, and
Right.
the whip is like 60 pixels. So you're just
Yeah.
like, well, all right,
When it's fully
anything and
extended, yeah.
everything. But it's
Right.
what that I mean. That's why on the stream when I did Super Castlevania 4, that like all the way up until when did I start to have trouble, like
I
death,
think it
and
was right.
it was something like that. But that's because Gaben is a joke, but Slogra has that really goofy hitbox where he'll hit you
Right.
without having hit you. But like
Yeah.
pretty much everything up until that point is kind of a joke because the whip is so strong.
Right, and it gets even easier with in the case of, death because you can hold up the whip, and the whip in Super Castlevania 4 acts like a shield because you're holding it up. So
Yes.
it will literally stop the sickle attacks. Not the big one, but the little sickles that he throws at you when he's
Yeah.
flying.
Yeah. And as soon as I think it was you and I remember if it was Shadow too, but you and a few others also pointed out like, "Hey, get behind the thing." And I was just like, "Oh, all right. Well, that fight became an easy thing too."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's those little tricks or those little glitches in the game that make it much, much easier.
Yeah. And I really wish I really do wish Rondo had done more in depth, but they were trying to stay so focused on the classic era. My
They were
my man, it's so funny. My buddy, so back when I had my apartment, my buddy came over and he and I both like challenging games, but he's not
right.
so much a retro gamer.
Oh, yeah.
And so like he's gone through and done like Resident Evil 4, like the Resident Evil 4 remake on hardcore and all kinds of other stuff. So like he's good at gaming. Don't get me wrong. But I sat him down to play Rondo, and for some reason he could it's like it's an inside joke all these years later because the crows on the way into the castle were screwing with him so hard.
Oh,
They
when you're
killed him.
trying to cross the bridge to get
Yeah.
to, the clock tower with the net. I remember that.
No. He on the way into the castle. He
Oh,
didn't
okay.
before you even get chased by Behemoth. He couldn't deal with the crows because it's such a different
Oh,
style of gaming. And
right.
so I put him through like the Dark Souls run of classics pretty much, shy of like the original trilogy. And then he was not prepared for the shaft fight because he never because it's what,
Right,
4
because it's
bosses?
yeah, it's there's the 3 ones you have,
Yeah, the
the
Bat,
Frankenstein monster,
Medusa,
Medea,
Frankenstein,
and
and
then
then
Shaft.
Shaft. And you have to do all of this on 1 health bar. He
Yeah.
wasn't ready. He actually got really snippy with me while I was just trying to just, like, casually talking. He's like, "I know."
At least Rondo, the actual Rondo was the first one you could save your game.
Yeah, yeah.
And at least it helped me out because when I finally got around to Dracula X Chronicles, I didn't have enough time in one sitting to do it. I mean, I was busy with life,
Yeah,
school and whatnot, work,
sure.
school, my job and whatnot. So, all
And
right.
yeah, and yes,
Go ahead.
Shadow, 3DS and, the Super Game Boy, they are awesome. I still absolutely, I agree. I just wish the 3DS wasn't dropped, but I keep forgetting that thing's, like, 10 years old now, so it's like, ugh.
Yeah, but with the cartridge system, Shadow, those things can go for a long time if you like make sure they don't get too dusty. They will work for decades. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, when I collected all of the old cartridges that I have, I also got the, right screwdriver to take them apart, and I went
Right,
through and cleaned up all of them. I bought a new laser for my PS1 because I have the Gen 2, the one that doesn't have
right.
the composite in the back, and then
Yeah,
my brother helped me to replace the connector for the NES, and everything works great. it's amazing what an eraser can do, because that's all you
No,
need.
right. I actually replaced the Nintendo Wii, and that thing's 2008. That's how old it is.
I
Because it was
know.
actually my wife's, and she brought it into our marriage. But so we have our kids use it. But all it took with the Nintendo Wii was we needed a new the laser projector
Uh-huh.
replaced. That's it, and that was like $60. And how much does that compare? Just $60 for a new laser lens compared to an
Mm,
entire console now. That's cheap.
yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, it's been a great
Oh,
time. It's
oh,
been a
that
really great time.
that's a shame, Shadow.
I get rid of all my retro consoles besides the DS to save space. I mean, if it works, it works. I mean, DS can still play like Game Boy Advance on it, from
Hmm.
what I remember.
I'm very glad that the Switch does have uh, not only a lot of the retro games, but they also added in the Game Boy stuff. So you can actually play like Metroid 2, and I think last time I looked, they have
Right.
like the
I
first of
looked.
the three.
Yeah, no, I actually looked at it. They've got the emulator options. You can buy an NES emulator for the Nintendo Switch store, and you
Yeah,
can get a like a Genesis emulator. Various emulators for the Switch store.
yeah.
Ninte-
So the Sega,
Nintendo, obviously, but it works.
yes, but the Sega has Bloodlines in it.
Yeah, it does.
The Game Boy has at least the first Castlevania. The NES has all three, and then the Castlevania 4 is on the Super. So they have. I think
Then there's
there's
the remastered collection,
64.
which is for everything, including
Yeah, yeah.
PC.
And I think they have the six. I think the original 64 is in their 64 one. I don't think Legacy of Darkness is. I'd have to look it
Right.
up.
And we're going to talk about it next time as we're transitioning to EGA, how Legacy of Darkness was the early game of the year gimmick because they were in a real rush because they were in a rush to finish Castlevania 64, but the team's intended game was Legacy of Darkness because Legacy of Darkness goes into why Dracula's back in 64. But yeah, they couldn't finish it because they had a rush schedule with the new they were changing producers because 1999 was when they were switching over to Koji Igarashi as the producer of the Castlevania franchise. So there was a rush,
Hmm.
and Koji Igarashi was like, "Okay, you know what? Just give me just put out the full game, and I'll be good with it." And that's where they got Legacy of Darkness.
Yeah, I'm I had not really known until within the last few years, so like relatively recently, like how crazy the development was rushed because I didn't know that they had no idea how to do anything 3D at the time.
Right. I mean, you're talking about what is it? It was Ocarina of Time, the original release of that, just come into 1998.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm trying. Metal Gear Solid was 1998, and it wasn't the first Metal Gear, but it was the first time they tried being 3D with Metal Gear. Uh, so there was a big rush, and some people did well at it, like the games like Croc or Mario 64, and others or Crash Bandicoot. Others not
Hmm.
so much. And I'm going to go into my recommendation episodes with more of those games like Crash Bandicoot next time,
Hmm.
just because it was a crazy mess. There was a lot of hits and a lot of misses during the late '90s, and they were trying to go 3D in that time.
Yeah, because you had the games that tried to stay like true to relatively simple designs, and then you had games that tried to mess around with physics really oddly, which
Right.
some kind of worked and some didn't, like Glover.
Yeah, I
Glover was
mean,
interesting.
right in the late '90s, a big thing that when it came to physics was a modified Quake engine. Essentially, that's how they
Yes.
build Half-Life games. A
Hmm.
modified Quake. Because other attempts at different engines, such as System Shock 2, which I enjoy it a bit, not as much as the first System Shock, but yeah. Um, so yeah, I admit we're running low on time, but there's going to be a part 2 and 3 that Al Bolino and I are going to schedule for a later time at around this time too. and I will compile all 3 parts into one big video when we're done with it. And hopefully, state this what happened will be a nice series about looking at the past of video games. So thanks for stopping by, Albie, and hope you have a nice time.
Of course, anytime.
So we'll be back here again, similar time of day, same channel.
All right. Thank you very much. And have a good day, Shadow. Thank you for stopping by, buddy.
Thanks, Shadow. See you later. All right. Episode 2 of Whatever Happened to Castlevania, starring Albelio and Adrian Fahrenheit Tepesh. So, like the previous episode, we are going to do a brief introduction. So, what our recent works are. So, my recent works have been, I'm working on talking about why I don't feel Diablo is a real RPG, or role-playing game. How about you, Albelio?
Well, let's see. I've got a few shorts coming up, and next video is going to be discussing some positive traits about men in movies.
Okay. Well, it's funny because I'm kind of rethinking because they're overlapping with some things in this about it. I had some rethoughts about, but we'll get to it when we get started. But it sounds interesting. So, to everyone out here, this is the second episode. I'm going to put all 3 into an actual premiere video when this is all done. And oh, good morning, Shadow Master. You're right on time.
Says the man who was late.
Well, that was on me. Don't worry about it.
No, I know.
So now we're getting it. So, like we were talking about last time, there was a big transition in 1999. They had a new producer for Castlevania at Konami. So here he is, Koji Igarashi, sitting in the Dracula throne room prop used in reference for the Castlevania game. So I thought that picture was pretty cool.
Oh, of him sitting in the
Dracula chair. It's the Dracula throne they used as a prop for reference in the Castlevania games, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Is that that's the image from Bloodstained, right?
Bloodstained, yes, but it's also he's sitting. It's the throne room. It's the chair that was Dracula's throne used as a prop in the game as well. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I remember my brother got into the Kickstarter, and so he showed me the clips, and I love that he just throws away the wine glass as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, they had a new producer. Koji Igarashi became the new producer in 1989, and that was the same year. And we were talking last time briefly about Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they were in a rush to finish 64, but he came in and the team for 64 asked him, "Hey, can we give a more complete version of this?" He said, "Sure, go ahead." And that's where we get Legacy of Darkness, which is the complete story as the team wanted it to be, including a subplot with Cornell the werewolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually sat down and watched a video discussing how they transitioned to 3D. These guys had no idea what they were doing, and I don't
hit or miss. I mean, they had, what was it? 1998 was Metal Gear Solid, Legend of Zelda, and right before that, PlayStation was on a roll because they had, of course, Metal Gear Solid. They also had Crash Bandicoot. PlayStation knocked it out of the park. Sony knocked it out of the park with 3D.
Spyro as well? Or was that was a little bit later? I don't remember. I don't know enough about Spyro, but
Spyro the Dragon, that was 1999, so that's close. Okay.
Yeah, but even then, on the other side, Nintendo was already doing all kinds of other things, and then Konami was just like, "What's this 3D thing that the youngsters are into?" And so they got thrown into something they were not prepared for, and Yeah, the differences are quite stark.
Hi, ZXO, or is that how you say it? Zo or ZXO? Yeah. So yeah, it was tough. The 3D was tough. PlayStation seemed to be doing the best at first out of all three,
Mhm.
with quite a number of hits. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people thinking he was hostile, but he was actually fine with certain alternate universe parts. But he was very particular about saying that it wasn't part of the story of the main timeline, such as Circle the Moon, which I like Circle the Moon, and we're going to get to it later on here.
Mhm.
So yeah, here it is, Bloodlines. So yes, you can play Bloodlines now because the Switch store has the Sega Genesis emulator. You can get that and play various games, including this one for Nintendo Switch right now.
Yeah, that'll be the first time I get to properly play it too, because I never owned a Sega or anything. So I've always been interested in Bloodlines, especially after Portrait of Ruin like directly ties into it.
Neither did I until I got the Genesis Classic that they sell. It's a Sega Genesis, but it comes with all the games just built into it, installed into it. So you just
Oh yeah,
boot it up,
that's right.
and you boot it up, and you pick which game you want to play, and it's cheaper. It's cheap, so relatively. So it was pretty good.
Yeah. So this is one of the last of the classic series.
Right, but I saved it for this episode because it's what Koji Igarashi made the continuity revolve around.
Mm-hmm.
So he made it be that there's no Alucard, no Belmonts, and then later, as you found out, Symphony was supposed to be a prequel to this one, but it was pretty good. There was two optional characters you can play as. One's Eric Alucard, who got Alucard's weapon, but Alucard isn't there for a reason. I don't know. Then there's Jonathan Morris, who has the whip. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it became a spear in Portrait of Ruin as well as this. And it's like, he had a sword.
Right.
That one I never understood.
Look, and we're going to talk about Portrait of Ruin later today, but I liked it because of all the ways they made Eric Alucard similar to Alucard as a way of showing that he inherited his title. He inherited his position as the vampire killer, but Alucard's not there. So I felt that was pretty interesting, pretty cool. But yeah, I saved it for this because this became the foundation for what Igarashi was making his timeline with as the new producer. So going here, yeah. So this is all that leads up to Bloodlines that we have in terms of Castlevania. Yeah. Rondo of Blood, Symphony of the Night, and Nocturne of Recollection.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and the third of which is almost never discussed. I think besides I don't know anybody else that's really gone over the radio drama.
Yeah, Stock has gone through it like all the way through, done a bit by bit review. I'll put a link to him after this live stream's done. Stock Tepish. He hasn't been active in a while, but he had some things he went over the various parts in it. But coming back to it, I actually do like what they did with Richter now. I mean, it was nice to see Richter back and willing to show how much he cared about Maria and about the guy Maria cared about. And I feel that was a great thing to show how much Richter, how noble and how determined Richter was in spite of everything that happened.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Symphony of the Night being the main one that Igarashi led, and he really set the standard.
Yeah, he did. As we talked about in the previous one, not everything in it was new. I mean, you could choose to be other characters, going back to Dracula's Curse or Castlevania 3, but and Keys was, as we talked about, all these things we think about as being later Castlevania were actually at the beginning. keys to open doors. That was Simon's Quest.
Mhm.
Buying things was Simon's Quest. Vampire Killer, which is the MSX. Just trust me, anyone who doesn't know about these, there's plenty of consoles you probably never know about. You'll probably never hear about because they just didn't do as well.
It really showed his depth of the franchise because he pulled so many elements, and hilariously, Simon's Quest was like the main DNA for Symphony.
Yes, it was. 10 years earlier. So insane. So crazy. But yeah, Symphony of the Night and the whole roaming was, as we mentioned before, Rondo of Blood was interesting because it was the first one that allowed you to save your game without continuing, which is pretty cool. And it was originally on, I'm not sure I can pronounce this right, Turbo GFX PC.
Yeah, basically, it's Turbo Graphics.
You're right.
Yeah, it was originally a PC engine, basically, for consoles. Japan was so far ahead of us when it came to like the console technology, because most of the original Famicom games, as an example, like Rondo of Blood, were actually basically discs.
Right, they were. The original, just for you in the audience, like Famicom, they were used. You know how there was. You probably were more familiar with the Apple II if you're around in the '80s, but back then there was the Famicom where you put floppy disks in a PC that was from Nintendo. Then I'm going to talk about the Sega 68000X, which is it was another one that we don't know about, but that was Sega's thing. And I know that there was Sony, there was 3DO. 3DO was a console, so.
Yeah, one of those obscure ones that no one ever really knew about.
Right. Yeah, I think it's Top Hat Gaming that goes through all these consoles that you may have not remembered, and he does it a whole lot. Even I didn't know about some of them. Mm-hmm. So I'll mention Top Hat Gaming as well, because he has a lot of references to the many consoles that actually existed, but you probably never heard about. Right, but as I mentioned the earlier one, like Nocturne Recollection isn't my flavor, but I'm glad that Richter, came back and showed how much he cared. That was very noble of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he needed some sort of. I don't think it was quite redemption, but he definitely needed to fix some of that issue. Some of his hubris. And try to make up for his failings, which was really nice.
Yes, it was. It was. Yes, but as we're going to show you, the reason why Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night seem connected is because Koji Igarashi himself, decided to call up the person and talk to him at lunch because he told the person working on Rondo of Blood, hey, I'm making the sequel, so I kind of want to know what I'm getting into when I'm making the sequel as to what happens in Rondo, because it's a sequel. I want it to make sense.
Mm-hmm. It's too bad he didn't get a hold of the franchise earlier, because, man, Rondo of Blood would have been so much nicer with the ability to slide dash and shoulder tackle.
It is, but at least you can unlock Richter as a playable character by beating it. Which is funny, ZXO, because you can also, when we're going to talk about Curse of Darkness, you can unlock Trevor mode by beating the game as Hector. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing that I think that Symphony of the Night may have done, is that in the PlayStation versions, at least you can unlock Richter by beating it with Alucard, just to see how a different, play style works. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the Sega Saturn version, you could play as Maria.
Yes. She was even more ridiculous than the mobile or other versions because she shot fireballs. Because originally, the shortcoming of Maria's attacks is her birds have a limited range and they boomerang back to her. But in the Sega Saturn version, she shoots a long-range fireball that goes all the way across the screen.
Yeah,
So
as powerful and overpowered as she was in Rondo, but still nice to see another character to be played as.
right, and there's also new areas you can go into in the Sega Saturn version, which is really rare. It's not as well known as the PlayStation version, but there's new areas like the upper gardens that you don't find in any other version of the game, with their own bosses and treasures. But yeah, going back to what you said, ZXO, yeah, a lot of similar things happen in Symphony of the Night. There's so many, and Curse of Darkness, there's so many unique items in them that there's replay value just to find the other unique items you didn't find before. So I'm going to try focusing on the time, but here's the other one. So after the Symphony is what we're going to do now, and that was Circle the Moon. That is a special place for me.
Mm-hmm. I have a soft spot for Castlevania 64 of all of the games.
I do. I do. I mean, it's a type of 3D where, you know, when you're playing as Reinhardt, it's very close to being, you know, a console side scroll, well, 3D at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also really appreciate the horror they managed to fit into it. Like when you first run across the vampire in the underground, and the girl
Yes,
from the ceiling, and you're like, ah.
Yes, and the reveal and the plot twist I felt was pretty good for a new Castlevania game.
Mm.
I was always suspicious of that one person that met you a couple times, and then you finally got revealed as who it was. Like, oh, that's it. You, Dracula, and the other guys. You guys were all such sick sons of. You know what? I'm trying not to get censored by YouTube here.
I gotcha. Yeah. So anyway, as Igarashi took over, the franchise seemed to really turn itself up. You got got Circle of the Moon. We got Harmony of Dissonance, which we'll probably get to.
We will. This is next because this is sort of an in between part right here. So this is when he was just starting. But one thing I liked about Circle of the Moon was their version of Carmilla. I mean, previously she was a flying mask or a flying skull, but in this one, she looks like this pretty woman in a red dress, and then she becomes this giant mix between a crab and a spider that tries to eat you in Circle of the Moon. I mean, it's just like, it's one of the craziest types of horror that I've seen from someone named Carmilla in a video game. The only thing that comes close is the Vampire Hunter D video game, which is the only one for Vampire Hunter D released in 2000.
Man, I haven't heard much about that game in forever.
Yeah, it was one of the last like PS1 games, to be honest. I mean, it's a lot of it's the same, similar to Bloodlust, but the animated film Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, but it's different in a number of ways. Like there are some monsters that only appear in the game, and Carmilla in the game actually fully comes back to life as a similar looking monster. And I'm just trying to tell myself that it is only a coincidence that she appears almost the same as how she does as the Carmilla in Circle of the Moon when she's this crab spider monster trying to eat you in that one. In both games, someone called Carmilla as a giant crab monster. So yeah, they ended up becoming out of canon because actually Reinhardt is a Belmont, but it didn't go with what Igarashi wanted. So Reinhard Schneider is Richter's great grandson, but it's just that Richter had a daughter who married out of the name Belmont, so his name is Schneider. But so Reinhard Schneider doesn't have the name Belmont, but he's directly descended from Richter.
Okay, well, that explains the name. I knew that he was a descendant. I just wasn't sure how. In the same way of like Morris, for example.
So yeah, Richter had a daughter who married a guy named Schneider. Her son, Michael Schneider, took the whip and he passed it on to Reinhardt.
Mhm.
So yeah, it still is Reinhardt. It's complicated, and I think not having him do the name Belmont kind of complicates it a little bit. But the Schneiders ended up showing up in Lords of Shadow, different characters, but they used a lot of these ideas that didn't make it into canon in Lords of Shadow. So,
Okay.
so now we're at Harmony of Dissonance, and yes, Albelio is playing through it on live stream. Is it today or tomorrow that you're going live with Harmony of Dissonance again?
Tomorrow at 7 Central, 7 p.m.
Okay. So if you're Eastern Standard like me, that's 8 p.m. But you can go check out. Hopefully, Albelio finishes Harmony of Dissonance tomorrow.
Yeah, after the fucking stupid box puzzle.
Yeah, that's a hard part. That's a hard part of it. I don't blame you.
I hate myself for not having figured it out. I really like puzzles, and then to see this really simple one, and I'm so angry with myself about that.
It's all right. I mean, a lot of these games have this such a way that you sometimes need to just rest and get off the game. Then it isn't so hard to get the answer.
Yeah. So yes. So this is the portable era, and this is probably what I think most people recognize when it comes to Castlevania.
Yeah, for the most part, yes. Dracula X Chronicles, which is how I first played. It's a remake of Rondo of Blood. And it's how I first played it, but I was glad that I could save my game because, it's college life, and you need to have other things. So save your game, come back to it later.
Yeah, this was quite the period.
It is.
I really like Portrait of Ruin myself. Although I've heard a lot of people say that what is it? Dawn of Sorrow is the last one. Is like the best game in the franchise apparently.
Yeah, Dawn of Sorrow for the DS is it's the conclusion, and it's in the future, in the 2030s. But it's about how there's a new person who has been chosen by Chaos to have Dracula's spot as to have the spot of being the right hand of Satan in the future. It's kind of interesting. Soma Cruz.
Soma is the reincarnation of Dracula.
Right. The same. Well, it's explained that he's a separate person from Dracula, but Chaos, or the devil in Castlevania, chose him to have a similar position where he represents Satan or the devil on Earth, or Chaos on Earth.
Mm.
So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's Aria of Sorrow too for Game Boy Advance, and just like you, I really enjoyed Portrait of Ruin for the kind of art they put into it. I mean, it's not the best art ever, but the paintings and the world within the paintings has an interesting dimension to show you elements of what Bronner and Dracula put into those pictures.
Yep.
Because Bronner puts in a World War I, or a way a town appears in World War I in one of the paintings, and that kind of that seems to be his nostalgia for the way the things were in the past. Or there's the painting of there's also Ancient Egypt and a number of other ones, but it's just interesting how there's thematics shown in the various paintings. And I always found that interesting in that game.
So which of these 6 is your favorite?
Portrait of Ruin. Second is probably Order of Ecclesia.
Okay, because I know Despair really wanted me to sit down and play Ecclesia. And I know that a lot of people were like, no, play other ones. And I was like, okay. It is.
I mean, it's an interesting kind of play style. Like, there's so many things you can do with Shanoa's different glyph spells. So,
okay,
you mix spells and it creates a totally new spell. You use two of the same and it creates an extra powerful version of the same spell. So there's all these different combinations you can play around with when it comes to her and her spell casting. There's also, it's an interesting and somewhat tragic story about her and her adopted family, but I'm not going to spoil too much about that game.
Thank you. All right, so this is I think by far the most widely successful of the Castlevania franchise. How well did all of these perform? Because this kept Castlevania alive for a long time.
Nintendo DS and PSP. I mean, a lot of people got access to playing Rondo of Blood by Dracula X Chronicles. Because, like we said before, the Turbo GFX wasn't all that well known. Most people just got the inferior version on SNES, just called Dracula X. So,
and that game will make you want to rip your fucking hair out. God, that Dracula fight is just infuriating. It's bad enough fighting him in such a limited form, but there are instant death. For anybody who doesn't know, in Dracula X, when you go to fight Dracula, there are instant death pits all around you.
I always thought of it as you have a couple of little scaffolding spots, and if you fall in, but that's the same idea.
It's just brutal. Like you could get so far, and because everybody in this franchise likes to get smacked around, and they throw themselves back with Spanish opera dramatics. You just die. You just die. It sucks.
Yeah, don't fall. Don't fall. Yeah. But this was a case where on the portable market they carved out a niche pretty well. So next one we're going to go into is the actual main PS2 Xbox games, and an odd case of Castlevania Chronicles. Castlevania Chronicles was on as I mentioned before, the Sega 68000X. That was the game that was originally for that obscure Sega PC back in 1993, but they made a version on PS1 that was that was more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this era is one I don't know a great deal of. Like I like Chronicles is obviously just another remake of one, just fine. But Lament of Innocence, Curse of Darkness, like I haven't Harmony of Despair. I haven't played these, but I do know quite a bit about the stories. So mostly I'll just be asking questions.
Yeah, hey ZXO, don't worry about it. I mean, this isn't exactly the best time of day for me to go live. I'm gonna have this all three as a premiere when more people can see it, because a lot of my audience isn't on right at this point. Don't worry about it. But yeah, Harmony of Despair is probably my least favorite of all of them, because I mean it's cool to have a multiplayer game where you play co-op, but it's nothing really plot wise. I mean, it's just cool the way to have crossed over characters and play multiplayer with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I need to try to make time to do anything, honestly. But I've seen you been streaming Curse of Darkness.
Yes.
How does it hold up all this time later?
I mean, Curse of Darkness is great. It's from before the dark times and before they microtransaction you to death. Just to get items, because in Curse of Darkness you don't have microtransactions. You have to actually go finding the materials, and there's replay value because some of the materials for making unique weapons and unique armor are so unique that you can't get all of it in one playthrough. You have to play through it a second time. There are characters like Saint Germain and others that have unique materials, but so far I'm trying to make the frying pan on this playthrough. And if you don't know, the frying pan is an overpowered joke weapon but it's hard to make. I've previously done the beam sword, a knockoff of the lightsaber, and oh yeah, I haven't done the Gatling gun yet, but it should be fun when I do.
There's a Gatling gun.
Yes, you can have a machine gun in this game, but it's like the frying pan. It's a joke weapon.
Okay. Can't imagine that anybody would have a hard time clearing out Dracula's castle with a machine gun.
Right. But no, I mean Curse of Darkness is similar to what Diablo used to be before your microtransaction like crazy in Diablo 3 and 4. You know, you just had to play the game and find the materials to make the items.
Mm-hmm.
You got the whole game for either Xbox or PS2.
Oh, Curse of Darkness is on Xbox One? Or the original Xbox?
Yeah, it had both. It was released for both the original Xbox and the original PS2. The advantage the Xbox had is it had widescreen dimensions. The PS2, not so much. So if you wanted to play widescreen, that was what the Xbox, and with somewhat high resolution, the Xbox version had that. But I'm fine with the PS2 version, which is what I've been playing live.
Gotcha. All right. Well, how about Lament of Innocence? You know, Leon, the beginning of the franchise, chronologically.
Right. Yeah, it's a prequel in the origin story. I think it's pretty good. I feel it holds up pretty well. You know, it brought back the whip swing that you got in Castlevania 4. Only now it's like a 3D game where you get to play a classic Belmont. Yeah, ZXO, I would like it if they finally did a collection with the PS2 games. That would make it really complete. Very complete.
Yeah, but we all know that Konami is allergic to money, so that probably won't be happening.
Well, Konami's main priority right now is they're remaking Metal Gear Solid, which I can understand how well Metal Gear Solid games sold. They did sell better than Castlevania ones as a series.
Which is a shame.
I mean, I don't entirely blame them. I mean, this is one case where I can understand the hype for Metal Gear Solid because Metal Gear was the first time they really emphasized sneaking up on people in a game. Because it was a game where if you didn't sneak up on people, you could get overwhelmed by an entire mob of security guards. But I would really like to have a remaster, and a lot of games that were originally PlayStation or Xbox end up on Steam. And I would like it if these games like Curse of Darkness, Lament of Innocence ended up on a Steam release.
Or GOG, considering they have a bunch of retro games, like the first 2 Warcraft games, but Steam doesn't.
Oh yeah, they have over at the GOG. They have Konami Classics, but it's not quite the same as Castlevania Remastered that Steam offers. I mean, Konami Classics is a mixture of Metal Gear 1 and 2. Then they also offer GOG also has Metal Gear Solid. But the Classics collection has Castlevania 1 through 3 and Metal Gear 1 and 2 in a remastered collection.
Okay.
So I have the links already in the playlist description for getting to GOG and Steam for anyone who's watching.
Sweet.
So the next one is yes, the canceled films.
Oh yeah, this is an interesting and a bit obscure for me. I don't know too much, but I've heard a lot about the various things. So take it away.
Okay, so Konami planned on a trilogy with Koji Igarashi as the main producer. There's going to be a trilogy of animated Castlevania films. There was some anime hype in the 2000s, so they wanted to take advantage of that part. So that's where Warren Ellis first writ, and he and Koji Igarashi could not come to an agreement on what draft they wanted to get made into a product, so it didn't end up happening. Great, immense creative differences between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So the disputes went on for a number of years, and basically the Netflix series had some of the concepts, but not all of them. Some concepts, such as Alucard appearing to be like Bela Lugosi, were part of what Koji Igarashi wanted to do, because he wanted to make it similar to Castlevania 3 and how he appeared in it, but better, but more detailed. And Koji also wanted to include Grant, and he wanted it to be a trilogy of films about 1.5 hours long for each one. And he and Warren Ellis couldn't come to an agreement as to what they wanted to actually put out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the most popular or most well known of the failed movies was actually at least here in America, was Paul W.S. Anderson of Event Horizon and Resident Evil fame, which is immediately the moment everybody has when they hear it.
And don't forget, Paul Anderson also was Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat movie.
Yep, yeah, and he was supposed to make a Castlevania movie. God, man, I think before Van Helsing came out. So what was that? 04,
03, 04,
or something like that. I'll look it up, but yeah. So that was originally supposed to be what happened. Yeah, 04. So that was originally what was supposed to happen, and he was left in production hell for I think like a decade, because he was making the Resident Evil series and just wiping himself with fandom, and then everybody's just like, let's not.
I do think the Ada Wong, I don't care much for the films. I do think the Ada Wong looked pretty good in the Resident Evil movie.
Yeah, he managed to get like certain characters to look like just right. Like Leon. Leon looks like an older Leon, which was great. Everything else, nope.
Yeah. Yes, Resident Evil, the subject of jokes about a video game movie, possibly only surpassed by Uwe Ball.
Oh.
The Postal movie.
Of all of the stupid things, at least Uwe Ball actually managed to defend his movies by literally fighting the journalists that reviewed them negatively.
Yeah.
Like everybody, for as much crap as that man gets, and it's well deserved, he at least literally fought to defend his movies.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah, Super Mario. I mean, there was a Super Mario Brothers movie long before 2023. It was in 1993 with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo.
The 90s were a dark time.
Well, they were a good time for guilty pleasure movies that I could laugh at how terrible they were.
Oh yeah, like Shaquille O'Neal and Steel.
Yes. Yes.
Or that movie that everybody thinks that Sebastian was in, Shazam or Kazam.
Kazam, yeah.
Yeah.
Where Shaquille is the genie.
Yeah, but everybody thinks it's Sebastian. He's like, no, stop it. But, yeah, so Paul W.S. Anderson didn't get to make that movie, which, in hindsight, I don't know which one I would have taken over this or the anime. But I think the anime. I think the first two.
And another thing is they have had interesting. They have had some good Castlevania fan films, such as Hymn of Blood. If you can find it on YouTube, it's a fan film about Castlevania featuring Simon in it.
Okay.
So I'll put a link to that after we're done as well. But we're going to get to the next one.
Yes.
So we can joke about this a few more minutes. So So getting back to this, it's funny is that the one unofficial Castlevania movie they had was Dracula 2000.
Oh, with Butler. Yes.
Gerard Butler is
Yeah.
Count Dracula. Yes. The funniest, do you know what the references to Castlevania in it were?
I have not seen Dracula 2000 in so long. I don't remember much about the movie. I remember
So,
liking it, but
yeah. So there's the leading man, and the co-star is a guy named Simon, but not Belmont. That guy named Simon does the Holy Bible attack, and he throws a cross like the Castlevania games.
oh wow, yeah. No, man, I have to I have to sit down and watch it because I really liked the idea that he's
Judas, yeah.
it's great, and he didn't quite die, and he got stuck in between and went on about his life. I thought that was really cool. I haven't seen it in so damn long.
I mean, the rest of the movie's a joke, but that was
yeah.
it. I just remember, looking at it, it's like, why didn't I not think of that origin? Like, it explains so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also really hard to make the curly haired dude from that 70s show tough.
Oh, that's right. He was from that
He's in it.
70s show.
Yeah.
Oh, he was.
Yeah. I'll have to pay attention to that. I really need to sit down and watch it again. I have so little time for actually watching movies, unfortunately, which is stupid considering that's what I do.
Well, sometimes I just don't watch videos on YouTube for a while. Like, I take a week off every now and then because it somehow it just makes me feel more creative. I don't know why, but it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus
blast.
So yeah. So now we can go to the conclusion. I forgot about that Dracula 2000. So yeah, overall, these are our final thoughts. Built on the themes of Bloodlines and used Bloodlines as a foundation for what they're making. Yes, and there's a Castlevania Easter egg in the Van Helsing video game. I'm gonna, for the next episode, for Loose Ends is the next episode. I'm gonna show you a picture of that reference to Castlevania in the Van Helsing game because if you go to the library in the Van Helsing game, you find a book that says a series of exploits by Dracula's arch enemies, the Belmonts. You can't get any more blatant than that.
Huh. All right, so retrospective themes and icons.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a month off of watching anyways. Yeah, so Century of Other Hunters. That's how we got the DS games.
When he was desperately trying to figure out how to prepare for Dracula without the Belmonts.
Right. And then at the end, they were back. But, yeah, so everyone get ready and get set. Episode 3 is going to be talking about Lords of Shadow. We're going to take however long we need to make sure we studied a bit about that. And also Loose Ends tied up. So thanks for stopping by. Hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. And yes, that is a reference, Shadow Master. And sayonara, and have a nice day.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
There we go.
Oh no, I don't know if your mic is working.
Oh, I hear the clicking. Nope, I think that's just my clicking.
All right. Does this sound?
There we go. Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. So calling in from Pennsylvania, Adrian Tepesh, and from Illinois, this is Albelio. So we have our third episode of Whatever Happened to Castlevania. I'm sorry about the audio.
You're good, buddy.
I hit the wrong settings. So we're gonna
All
get
good.
started here. Third episode of Whatever Happened to Castlevania. So we're gonna have all three of these episodes together in one as premiere later next week. So it should be a great premiere on this and Rumble. And without too much further ado, we're going to get started with our third and last for a while Castlevania episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about, and this is our recent attractions. So I made a monster episode, Medusa, and Finding Annette in Dracula X Chronicles. Albelia's recent ones are
Oh, you cut out there, buddy.
There, Albelio?
No, you just cut out there.
Let me see.
I can kind of hear. Well, I can hear you now. It was weird. You like roboted for a moment.
All right.
Changed up genres on me.
Does this sound better?
Oh, much better.
Okay. Something with the volume. My other mic had an issue, so I'm going to be getting a better one next week.
Oh, sure.
All right. So that's better. So these are recent attractions. Anything you want to say about yours?
Yeah. Well, I posted a video discussing Inside Out 2, which turned out to be fine. It was just more of the same. And I discussed whether or not Furiosa deserved to fail after its legendary box office failure during what was that, Memorial Weekend?
Yeah, it was Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. So it's our day. We celebrate. Other countries have it for celebrating those who died in war for their country. So we're going to go on to the next one. And so here we're going to talk about a reboot. So they were not having very great expected results in selling Castlevania games near the end. There was Harmony of Despair, but that's more of a multiplayer co-op game. But I think it's enjoyable if you can hook up with your friends online and play together. But Harmony of Despair just wasn't quite it. And the Ending Sorrow game didn't quite sell the number that it was. So they decided on doing a reboot, new alternate universe. But we still have a whip-wielding protagonist called Belmont. It's just pretty different. So what were the things you're reading about, Albelio?
For Shadow?
Yeah, Lords of Shadow.
So I watched.
How far have you gotten in learning about it? So we have Gabriel Belmont who starts it, but we don't have the Matthias or Leon as it starts.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to trying to recreate something from scratch and keeping it similar and trying to do something a little different. So I'm actually not necessarily against Gabriel becoming the vampire.
Right.
But
yeah, you play as the Dracula.
Really harsh.
But yeah, it was pretty brutal. I think some elements of the mythos in Lords of Shadow were interesting. The fact is, we'll go into the Forgotten One in an upcoming slide, but the Forgotten One was an interesting personification of why the castle is alive. So
yes, which is also almost like never discussed.
Right.
But,
You don't see a personification in the older games, really. I mean, you see Chaos, but his role is more of that of Lucifer or Satan in Lords of Shadow. But it's interesting that you get to play as the Dracula most of the time. It gets a little different in the middle game or Mirror of Fate, which was a disappointment. But overall, Lords of Shadow started well. The first Lords of Shadow was 1.77 million games sold, which puts it even above the unit sales of the first Castlevania in 1986 at 1.56 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the largest selling Castlevania, I think, ever. And it seemed like, as I did my research, is like everybody was more or less okay with the changes until you get to the end.
Right. I mean, in the first Lords of Shadow game, it's kind of similar to Lament of Innocence because you are playing Gabriel with the whip. Well, it's just that it's not as unique as the Vampire Killer in the other ones. Like you start with an Alchemist whip in Lament of Innocence, but it eventually becomes upgraded. In the case of Gabriel, his whip is something that he does with his cross, which the other knights technically have. It's like they Jedified it. I'm gonna say it like they made it like a lightsaber that Jedi Knights use, rather than unique whip it was in the original Castlevania.
I could agree to that. I do like that it's shaped as a cross. I just wonder where the chain goes.
Right, it comes out like a lightsaber. That's why I said it. That's why I thought of a lightsaber when I was originally getting this presentation ready. Wait a minute, the chain comes out of the whip, and I mean, to be fair, Leon's whip is a cross that he's holding, but it doesn't have the chain coming out of it. It's just the part that Leon holds is a cross or like a hilt.
It's like the hook shot for Link. It's like, how does he lift it? It's got to be so heavy.
The length of chain, yeah. Yeah, that's another way of thinking of it, Legend of Zelda. But I think they the cast was interesting. They chose Patrick Stewart. Oh, why am I forgetting this? Robert Carl. That's it. That's the main voice is Robert Carl. I forgot it for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
Rob Carl and Patrick Stewart as the co-stars.
Yeah, what was the company? Mercury Steam, I believe, was the ones who worked on this.
They did some accuracy, and they even called out to.
They really went
David
wild on this one.
They did. It was crazy enough because David Cox, who Konami had as the producer, he just figured like I don't know exactly what I'm doing. This is Dale help me with this because you produced a lot of games before this. So so he asked Hideo Kojima for Metal Gear Solid. Like, I need to learn a little bit about this because I haven't been a producer on a video game before. Could you help?
Yeah, and it's not it's an incompetent game necessarily, too, because Mercury Steam went on to make the official remake for Metroid 2.
Yeah,
so,
they did.
The promise was there.
Right. But I just find it funny that they asked the producer for Metal Gear Solid over there to co-produce the first one.
Yeah, he's a bit of a nut job.
He trolls quite a bit. I don't know if you've seen how many of Kojima's trolls on. He's pretty light. Kojima's pretty lighthearted and not that serious. Yeah, he had a pretty funny happy birthday to Kurt Russell. I mean, even though Kurt Russell said no to being the voice of Solid Snake, he said a pretty cool happy birthday to Kurt Russell. So I thought that was funny.
Oh, Kurt Russell would have been awesome.
Right. I was actually watching. So Escape from New York came on to Amazon Prime yesterday. So I was watching part I'm going to try and finish it today.
Okay.
Finish Escape from New York today. But again, I'm going to go back to this. So, as I noted in the end of this, it shares similarities with Castlevania and Legacy of Kain. So, I'm someone who's played through Legacy of Kain. It's another dark fantasy series, but it has a lot of similarities in the plot. So, Lords of Shadow begins with Gabriel Belmont. You also have a new Trevor, new Simon. So Gabriel's top, Trevor's lower right, lower left, and Simon is lower right.
Yep. And I find it interesting the way they just kind of they basically kept it's interesting how they kept the same basic characters, which again is fine, and then basically just made it one big family.
Right. Well, Dracula and the Belmonts are the same family,
Mm-hmm.
which is the idea of legends. Which is the idea of legends where supposedly Alucard is Trevor's father. Well, it's even weird here because it's a hold my beer because now Alucard and Trevor end up being the same person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting choice to learn about. I didn't know that when you go through Mirrors of Fate, you see the different outcomes of everything.
Right.
And so when it's revealed, you're just like, oh.
Yeah, because the mirror is the new Belmont artifact. I mean, the whips aren't unique in Lords of Shadow, but the mirror is. So Gabriel first. Okay. So this is a little complicated in Mirror of Fate. So Trevor gave the mirror to Simon, and Gabriel got it back, and then he saw in the mirror that that's it. So you remember how they try to recreate this in the Castlevania Netflix series, but I feel they do it better here because Gabriel realized when he looks in the mirror, it's like, oh shit, Trevor is my son, and I just fatally stabbed him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were some similarities, like when it's the first episode when he strikes down Alucard.
Yeah. But in this one, it's cool because Gabriel or the Count Dracula. This one, Gabriel realizes, oh crap, I already stabbed him, and I am his father. But I think it's also cool too when Trevor talks to Simon and you realize, oh, the mirror, he's not lying. So the Mirror of Fate is kind of interesting, but I feel that they blew through it in Mirror of Fate a little too quickly. I feel they could have saved more for Lords of Shadow 2. But other than that, what are some of the things you felt they kind of rushed a bit or didn't do as well as they could have in this one?
The biggest issue for me, since I haven't played the games yet, but from what I've heard, it really just comes down to the story and how there's no proper connection between all three of them, and the story itself is convoluted on, well, we need to turn you into Dracula, and we didn't mean to, but then you get to the later game and you're like, oh, we kind of actually needed to because Satan's coming back, and it's like, wait, what? Why?
Well, yeah. So yeah, it's kind of abruptly there. So in Lords of Shadow 2, you meet Alucard, and it's like, wait a minute, who are you? So you need to go back to Mirror of Fate to find out that, oh, he's Trevor, and Gabriel fatally stabbed him. He didn't seem to respond to all the blood, so he put him in a coffin, and it ends with the Lords of Shadow Simon, which you get to play as in Mirror of Fate. For most of the game, and you get to see. So Simon leaves. Alucard says he'll go down with the castle along with the Gabriel as well. So Gabriel comes back, but you need Mirror of Fate to find out how this new Alucard came about. And then they don't exactly work linearly in a linear fashion in Lords of Shadow 2 because you have flashback parts to explain what exactly happened, because Gabriel jumps from the medieval into the present, from the 1400s into the present, and get all these flashbacks, so it's out of order, so to speak, in terms of figuring out how you got to there.
Yeah, the one issue I did see that people brought up too was that the DLC that was supposed to answer all of the problems just kind of have you playing as Alucard, and then he puts the sword away, and you're like, all right, that's it. There's
Yeah,
not really,
it was a
there's
bit
not like
abrupt.
a reason why he had like Gabriel has to come back to fight in the future.
Right. But I think one of the good parts was how they did Patrick Stewart as Zobek or the Grim Reaper, because
Mhm.
at the end of the first one you realize, oh crap, they were basically having him be, your right hand man as Gabriel, and all these things like they'll be seeing me soon as hints that that Zobek, played by Patrick Stewart, actually was the Grim Reaper. But then
Mhm.
you realize that by calling back, they did a great job of hinting it to you. It's slightly not as good as Zed from Curse of Darkness, which is the canon one, but it was pretty interesting of a plot twist when they finally revealed that Patrick Stewart was Death.
Better than just dying immediately like the Emperor from Oblivion.
Right. Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the better times in Elder Scrolls. That and Morrowind. So, but yeah, the reveal of the Grim Reaper with Patrick Stewart and all those hints that he gave you throughout the
Mhm.
game was pretty well done. It was the better part. I was disappointed with the new Walter Bernhardt because he's a guy who plays with souls and dolls, and you just have to get rid of him. I mean,
Mhm.
Carmilla was a bigger part of that element of that story than Walter was. So he felt like a discounted version of the doll maker from Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen.
Mhm.
Which even then, that doll maker was a side part to get for the plot to get rolling, and for you in Legacy of Kain to travel back in time. So yeah, if you're wondering what I'm saying, Legacy of Kain has a lot of time travel into the past and gets slightly more confusing than this does. although in the later Soul Reaver games, you mainly spend time in one particular part in time, so you don't have as much time traveling around. But yes.
Yeah, anytime time travel is introduced, it doesn't matter how good or bad the game is. Like the time travel basically unintentionally it basically ruins the experience to some degree because there's just no way to understand time travel properly.
Yeah. Oh, from DA Drive. Yes, the Chrysogrim was a plot device. So yes, the Alucard, who's actually Trevor in Lords of Shadow, has it. He made it because Gabriel Belmont broke a holy cross, and he made the sword from the cross. Is that if that answers you, DA Drive, CJ?
Yeah, Chrysogrim is the sword that
It's the
I believe
broken
he puts.
sword.
Yeah, it's the one that he puts in the castle.
Right.
That Alucard puts in the castle. Trevor.
Yes. This is
And that
so
doesn't really answer anything. It's just
right.
there.
It's from when Gabriel killed Carmilla in the first one. So he built it from the broken cross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to see 99, especially since they never made a game out 99, but they were sidetracking to make Castlevania 64 in 99. And even that was incomplete because it was the Legacy of Darkness that was what what the makers of Castlevania 64 really wanted to go with.
It's the same sort of thing. Not to change the subject because I don't want to bury the lead, but it's the same sort of thing that drives me insane about like Nintendo with Legend of Zelda. It's like they always talk about these massive epic wars. We never join them, never experience
Right.
them. We're
Every
always just
single list
we're just
has
some
its
twink in a tunic trying to help some princess. I want to be a part of the
right.
wars.
I mean, those wars are they're part of the past in those games, but You know,
Yeah.
it's part of the backstory that the goddesses or the wise men did something, and you have to kind of try to prevent it from being undone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kojima kind of sick. I agree, ZXO. It is pretty interesting. Kojima has an interesting set of um, he has had interesting ideas. Some of them really goofy, and some of them somewhat interesting. We'll talk more about some of Kojima's games because when Albelio and I recommend retro games next week, I'm going to be talking about Metal Gear Solid. Because Metal Gear Solid was where Metal Gear became 3D. So
And I will have my options for you later today. Just
yeah,
this I'm still adjusting to the schedule. This it's been brutal.
oh, it's fine. We had a crazy thunderstorm and tornado warning yesterday.
I heard. I hope I'm hopeful you guys are safe.
We're okay. We just you never know when a thunderstorm could turn into a tornado. I mean, Pennsylvania isn't Tornado Alley, but it can happen. So you just have to do what you have to do.
Yeah,
I
gotcha.
it's kind of funny, you know. We went into our basement floor in the house just to be sure, but when it's over, it's over. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this after this with the alternates and I'll finish it off with mentioning Victor Belmont, and as I mentioned before, they had Satan or Lucifer instead of Chaos that you'd have in the Sorrow games, and they had Victor Belmont, who was supposed to be in Castlevania Resurrection, but he's in this one in the future, and he's one of the boss battles fight, but he's the last Belmont Holy Warrior, or at least he thought so. But then you've got Gabriel back, so he kind of takes over. So yeah, they took ideas from Legends, Castlevania Legends, like the Belmonts and Dracula being the same family, or Victor Belmont, and put him in Lords of Shadow. So we're coming at any our conclusions. My conclusion is that the reboot was well. It just kind of went down a slope after the first Lords of Shadow.
Yeah, it like I mentioned from my again, because I haven't played the games. I do want to get a hold of them. But it's like everything peaks pretty hard right before that like third act of the game, and then it just drops off hard because the story just makes no sense and it's too much too quickly.
Right.
Mirror of Fate seems to be the most like universally acknowledged one as being decent across the board, although it still doesn't answer the time problem. And then pretty much Lords of Shadow 2 is just gets shit on by everybody.
It does. I mean, it's hard to think much more plot after Lords of Shadow 2. I mean, it ends very similar to Dawn of Sorrow. I mean, you've defeated the biggest of the bad, so what's left to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it feels a lot like Metal Gear Solid in terms of how the last boss battle works. But,
yeah.
So
and they also have those Shadow the Shadow of the Colossus styled fights too, which is really interesting.
Oh yeah. I don't know if that's one of your recommendations. Just let me know. I mean, we might even do more than one retro game recommendations coming up.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it started well as a well-meaning reboot to set up a really congested story or timeline, but it ultimately ended up going downhill after the first one. But it was the highlights to me are just the fact that the actual soul that makes the Castlevania in these games alive is an actual person that you battle in the game as Gabriel. And to me, that's interesting. Not only that, but the alchemical stones all are named. I mean, they never explained to you what the orange stone that Chaos has. I mean, we get introduced to two of the three alchemical stones. We know what the black and the red ones are in Lament of Innocence, but we never know what the orange one that Chaos has in Dawn of Sorrow is. But in Lords of Shadow, the alchemical stone that's orange is the Stone of Destruction, Ice and Fire. So I felt that was interesting how Lords of Shadow actually gave that detail to the alchemical stones, which you didn't quite get in the original timeline. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. I kind of want to dig into the Lords of Shadow a bit more, just to have more of a basis on it.
I'm going to be
But-
getting the Steam versions of these games next month, and I'm going to try them out that way.
Cool. I'm pretty much looking at getting the Steam versions too.
I mean, I have the PS3, but something's wrong, I think, with my Lords of Shadow 2 disc. So I'm going to shoot the Steam version
Aw.
as the backup. It's sad. It's sad. But my PS2 games still work, so there's always a bad one in the batch. So
Right.
this is so references in media to Castlevania. So we're going to go over this. Dracula 2000.
Yeah,
So-
you mentioned this one, and I did catch your tweet the other day. I never put this one together, and I enjoyed this movie when it came out.
Oh, I did, because it was just this. Yeah, you know what, CXO? We could talk about the Netflix series for the original and Nocturne later in a later episode.
I'm gonna shamelessly plug myself, ZX. If you go to my channel, I have a video where I thrash Nocturne.
Yeah, I think you did slightly better than that the Reaper guy on YouTube.
And I do
But, yeah.
at some point want to return to doing the other 4 seasons of the original show. I just have not had the time. So I will get around to doing all of the Netflix Castlevania properly later.
We could talk about it. We're going to take a little break though. We're talking about retro games you recommend. But yeah, so the origin when I watched Dracula 2000, I thought, why did I not think of that origin in particular?
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, so the reference here: somebody throws the cross.
and uses the Holy Bible attack that gets used by Alucard and Richter Belmont too. The Holy
Mhm.
Bible attack. I tried. I get a copyright mark, but I'll put a link to both those videos I have in short video form in my description because I have them and I don't get copyright takedowns for the short videos on my YouTube channel. But yeah,
Mhm.
but I do if I put it in a live stream. Don't ask. Glitch Text. I think isn't that a Netflix series? Glitch Text.
I am unaware. I am unaware.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, getting back to it, there's a guy named Simon, not Belmont, played by Johnny Lee Miller, and he's the guy who does both of those Castlevania reference attacks of throwing the cross and the Holy Bible from Rondo of Blood and Symphony. So.
Mhm. What it's been forever since I've seen Dracula 2000. What is the Bible attack? Like
So
I know
he's
I know
in
the
the
ability.
library. So he's in the library. So in Rondo of Blood or Symphony of the Night, Richter or Alucard they let out pages from a Holy Bible and it like burns and attacks monsters. And he does the same thing in this one. So he's cornered in the library with Dracula coming at him because he's going after Mary, played by Justine Waddell. And Simon pulls out the Holy Bible, and Dracula's like, "You think that's a threat to me?" So he opens it up, and the pages attack him, just like how Richter or Alucard attack with Holy Bible pages in their video game.
Ow! I need to go back and see this. It's been so long. I don't remember it.
So he does the Holy Bible attack and the cross throw in this same movie.
Nice.
And both of those were in the games before Dracula 2000.
Mhm.
And plus his name is Simon, just not Belmont.
Mhm.
So all those things, both of those things. So now this one is not a case of being a reference to Castlevania so much as Castlevania is a reference to this one, especially in Lament of Innocence. Gary Oldman and Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder.
Great
I
movie
do
too.
like this film, but I felt like they miscast Keanu Reeves. I'm sorry, as Harker.
Yeah. Everybody kind of
But
accepts that.
otherwise, Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman are pretty good in it.
I will be right back. Go ahead and continue.
All right, so yeah, Gary Oldman breaks the mold of usually having a person with the surname starting with L, because obviously Gary Oldman starts with an L. But Gary Oldman is the Dracula in this one. He starts out as Vlad the Impaler. That's his origin according to this Dracula film. And otherwise, they go into the events of the Dracula novel set in 1897. He has a wife named Elizabetha, which, as you may recognize, that Elizabetha is the name of Matthias Cronquist's wife in Lament of Innocence. So Dracula has a wife with the exact same name. And what's interesting is also that Lisa and Elizabetha in the Castlevania games look almost exactly alike. So, and both Elizabetha and Mina Harker and Elizabetha both look about the same. So, because they're both played by Winona Ryder. So both Elizabetha, the wife that died back when he was Vlad the Impaler, and okay. So DA Drive CJ, it's on Nickelodeon and then Netflix. Okay, because I thought when I saw Glitch Text, there was this show that my son was watching with me. And I thought, oh, where they fix video games. I thought, oh, I think I recognize what you mentioned. So maybe I'll see what episode that's in. Thanks, DA Drive. So Walter's wife's name. Um, Walter Bernard didn't exactly have a wife that I know of. There are other vampires and Medusa in the Castle in Lament of Innocence, and he had another vampire as his kind of slave. But no. So Mina Harker and Elizabetha from back in the days of Vlad the Impaler both look the same. They're both played by Winona Ryder. So otherwise, it goes in the events of the novel. So it's a pretty good representation of the Dracula novel. So I do recommend it, in spite of my complaints that Keanu Reeves is miscast. Anthony Hopkins, Winona Ryder, and Gary Oldman all did a pretty good job. So now here are some Easter eggs from video games. So the one on top is from the Van Helsing video game. That was for PS2, Xbox. So I'm gonna read it for you. You glance at a mysterious book relating to the exploits of Dracula's arch enemies, the Belmonts. So yeah, in the Van Helsing video game, it's based on the 2004 film starring Hugh Jackman, which I think it's okay. The
Sorry
Van
about that.
Helsing video. So I'm back, and we're going to the video game references here. So Metal Gear
Oh, sure.
Solid and Van Helsing. So I was talking about how the Van Helsing video game, based on the film starring Hugh Jackman, has the references to the Belmonts if you walk through the library. So
Oh, the PS2 game. Shit, that's been a long time.
yes, yeah, it's been a while. And Metal Gear Solid
What a fun movie.
has Easter egg too. It was. I really liked how the Van Helsing movie started with the black and white, where the monster, where Frankenstein makes the monster. And they start with a black and white homage to older films by Universal.
Yes.
It's okay, Shadow Master. We're gonna save this whole stream and make a supercut.
Yeah. Hey, Shadow. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, I mean it was an interesting film. I mean it had a lot of comical moments to it and monster moments as well.
It's more fun than anything else, I think.
Oh
is
yeah.
what it's most well known for, and being Castlevania before we ever got the anime.
Yeah. But the next one is Metal Gear Solid. So in order to do this in Metal Gear Solid, you need a memory card and you need a save game for Symphony of the Night. Then during the boss fight known as Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid, he'll the game takes a look at your memory card. So he'll notice if you have a Symphony of the Night save file on your memory card. He'll say, "Oh, you like Castlevania, don't you?"
Oh, interesting.
So it's a fourth wall break by Psycho Mantis, where he's reading into your mind about what games you've been playing. So you need to have a Symphony of the Night save file for him to notice. Hey, you like Castlevania.
What an obscure reference.
And it gets funnier too, because you mentioned how they asked, because David Cox, who produced in the first Lords of Shadow, actually asked Hideo Kojima to co-produce for the first Lords of Shadow game. So it's another connection to within Konami to their games.
Interesting. I never would have guessed that connection existed, but all right.
Yeah. But he goes over other games. It just depends what you have save files for on the memory card, and he'll read it. It even works when you emulate, PlayStation as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you have a virtual memory card, so it works that way as well. It works that way too. So this is our next episode. Next week, we're going to be recommending our retro video games, and we're going to be taking turns talking about our favorite games that we recommend you play. Even though they're old, they're golden. So we're going to be recommending what games we think you should play from in the past in 2024. So I have some mine, and Albellion will be sharing some of his. So we're going to be taking turns recommending. I miss when Konami cared about their games. Well, yeah. I miss the part where I miss when they came out with new games and they aren't remaking right now like they're doing with Metal Gear Solid.
Which is a shame because we'll never get like proper remasters of any of the Castlevania games at this point.
Right. I mean, we have it to a limited extent. The ones that we don't have remastered now are Symphony of the Night, and the 3D ones for PS2, and Castlevania 64, and the DS ones. So all those games that they haven't remastered yet could be one remastered collection, and they would finish it off. But they're not exactly making things that are new.
Mm-hmm.
Bloodstained, as you mentioned earlier last time, in part two, although yeah, Bloodstained is a spiritual successor, and there's also the Dead Cells Castlevania mod, but that's what we have now. And Grimoire of Souls, I don't quite count it. It's a pay-to-win game. I don't like pay-to-win games.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. CJ, I have heard of Skies of Arcadia. I played it on my cousin's Dreamcast. Maybe there's a GameCube version or something that I could try. But
I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't know it.
So I played it on my cousin's Dreamcast for a little bit. It's a role-playing game where you fly an airship in a world where you have floating cities and airships shooting cannons at each other in the air. That's how crazy it is.
Oh, okay.
So you're building up your ship, and you're building up your ship, upgrading your equipment on the ship, your guns and other parts on your ship, and you have your crew. So you're a pirate in the sky.
Mm.
And it was one of those very just unique kinds of games that I just don't see much of. I mean, maybe Star Control, which I'm going to be mentioning in my own standalone recommended retro games, and I'm also going to be mentioning it in the next episode too. So that's a spoiler right there. I'm going to be mentioning Star Control 2 comes close, but that's not in the air. That's out in space.
Miriam versus
Yeah.
Shanoa. Crap, who's
Oh,
Miriam?
Miriam is from. I think Shanoa has a lot of edge on Miriam. Here, I'll try. I'll bring up the page if I can. Here, Miriam.
So is Miriam in Castlevania? Because I'm drawing a blank here. I know Shanoa.
Yeah, I know she's in Castlevania. She's in Bloodstained. That's who she is.
Oh, that's right. That's the main character. Sorry, I haven't played Bloodstain yet.
So, Darkstalkers by Capcom. I may get around to that. I played the Darkstalkers for PS1 as a long time ago, but it could be on recommended retro games. The recommended retro games is going to have multiple episodes because it takes us quite a bit of time to cover them all. So you're in for a treat.
I don't
You're
know
in for a
anything
treat.
about Darkstalkers. I only know
Oh, it's a
Morgan
fighting
because
game.
everybody knows her, and
It's the
John
fighting
Talbane because of Death Battle.
Oh, those ones. Okay. Yeah, I played Darkstalkers a while ago. But it was a fun way to uh it it got some interest from me. Game prepped me to be, oh, so you mean Skies of Arcadia, CJ? Yeah, I can see that. I mean, Pirates in the Sky, One Piece Pirates. So yeah. But to finish this off, I know we're kind of pressed for time here. I'm going to put all three of these Castlevania episodes together into one trilogy supercut that I'll be premiering on YouTube and on Rumble. So that should be good. And next week, we're going to have plenty of recommended retro games. Well, at least a few for our first episode. Anything else you want to add, Albelio?
Well, thank you very much for having me, as usual. New video tomorrow, and thanks again.
All right. Oh. Well, Lords of Shadow. I already posted part 1 of Lords of Shadow lore. I'll put it in the description, okay? All right. Thanks, Zane. So, in the meantime, have fun out there. Be safe. We're going to be coming back next Thursday with another episode. So, time to sign off and have a wonderful day. To be continued, yes.
I have played Soul Calibur. I love